There we go. We're live.
Yes, what? We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Husker fans, to the very first installment of the Big Red Roundtable, a panel discussion of all things Husker football that's bourbon-fueled and features the unholy alliance of the Husker Cuzcast and Generation Red, along with our guest in the studio today, Chris, the host of the Huskers in Enemy Territory podcast on YouTube. For the next hour or so, we're going to talk about 6 topics. And hopefully it only goes an hour or so, but we'll see. And we thank you for watching. My name is Ken. I'm from Generation Red.
Oh, yes, and I'm Scott. I am also from Generation Red. I am attempting to share our live stream right now on social media platforms. Welcome to the stream.
Go ahead, guys.
I am Justin with the Husker Cuzcast.
I am Derek with Husker Cuzcast.
And I am Tyler with the Husker Cuzcast.
Thanks for
and
joining
I'm Christopher
us,
with Husker and Enemy Territory.
That's right. He is our guest panelist tonight, and I first noticed your channel, Chris, about 6 months ago or so, I think it was, when I was looking for Husker content, and son of a gun, this bearded guy popped up on my screen. I said, let me check this out. And I thought it was pretty good. And then we happened to find each other on Twitter, and when Justin and I started talking about this as something that we might want to do, you were kind of the first guy I thought about adding to our first live stream. So thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. Why don't you let everybody know how long you've been doing the podcast on YouTube and why you came up with the name that you did?
So I think I've been doing it for about a year now. I think I started it, let's say, I think it was probably last December maybe. So one reason why I started the channel was because I wasn't really getting the kind of the Husker content that I wanted to see through the media, because since I live in Iowa, and that's one reason why I do have the Huskers in Enemy Territory name, because I live in Iowa. So it's really tough for a lot of us over here in Eastern Iowa to get Huskers content. So I figured, why not start up a channel for myself?
Sounds
neat,
good.
man.
So where you said you're what? You're really in enemy territory because you're right there,
Yeah.
over there by Iowa City, aren't you?
Yeah, so we're located in just south of Iowa City in a city called Riverside.
All righty. Well, that's awesome. Thanks again, Chris, for joining us tonight. And as we talked about in our pre-show talk, and just in case anybody who watches a lot of live streams may get pissed off at me for this next part, but Chris isn't going to lead off our talk tonight, even though that's proper etiquette for a live stream or a podcast, because his topic is so good, we decided to leave the best for last. So we've got 6 great topics to talk about tonight, and if any of you have read the topic list that I put out on Twitter, horse porn isn't one of them, just so you know.
I guess I'll tear that page out.
Justin was excited too.
Dang it.
So much for that.
He was
Got some
strapped
quality
up and
research
ready to
in on
go.
that one.
Some quality research. You had to have a
Yeah,
live
video I had to
stream,
watch.
too. Yeah. Well, we're going to lead this one off with Scott's topic. He's got a great one for us because, damn it, we just haven't argued enough about this one. So go ahead, Scott.
Hey, folks. So my topic that I wanted to talk about was the painful and historically significant era that is known as the Frost era, and reflecting on it. And I'll just kick it off by just stating that I think it's pretty much safe to say that that Frost has been probably the worst coach that we have had since the Bill Jennings era. For some background with Bill Jennings, he was our coach from 1957 until 1961, and finished with a record of 15-34. Frost currently holds a 15-29 record. Both are well below the 500 ratio. And even Mike Riley, which I would argue is probably one of the worst coaches we've definitely had in the last 60 years, even he was able to scrounge up a 500 winning record going 19-19. In 4 seasons, the best record that Frost has been able to accumulate has been a 5-7 record that came in 2019. And I'll just spout off a few interesting things that I just kind of wanted to highlight was that the top 10 wins of the Frost era, which arguably there's probably only 10 wins that are even quote unquote notable of the Frost era. And the top 2 of them, in my opinion, and just by record alone, both came in 2018. Number 1 being Michigan State, which they finished that season 7-6, and Minnesota in 2018, which they finished that season 7-6. But then if you go down the list with Illinois, Penn State, Illinois again, Rutgers, Northwestern this year, Purdue, Maryland, Northwestern in 2019, none of their records are above 700 or above 500. Aside from, like I said, those 2, Michigan State, Minnesota, and then technically Illinois, but they went 6-7 because they lost in their bowl game. So most notable games of the Frost era have been against opponents that were sub 500. So that's just something to reflect on. And the next thing that I wanted to talk about was most notable players, in my opinion, that we have seen in the Frost era. And that would be the following. And I just want to make a note that I'm only picking the players that have either graduated here or are currently on the roster, and they're not in any particular order. And I'm sure all of these names you guys will reflect on and be like, yeah, they were pretty dang good. We got Stanley Morgan Jr., Divine Azigbo, Luke Gifford, Cam Taylor-Britt, Darian and Damian Daniels, Ben Stilley, Lamar Jackson, Khalil and Carlos Davis, Cam Jurgens, Will Honus, Jojo Doman, DiCaprio Boodle, Freedom Akinmoladun. I can still never say that name. Samari Torre, Austin Allen, and Jack Stoll. Those are the 18 significant players, in my opinion, that have been in the Frost era, which, of course, none of them are actually Frost recruits for obvious reasons that Frost has only been here for 4 years. And so we really don't have much of a pool to pick from that. But then current notable players during the Frost era have been Garrett Nelson, Nick Henrik, Luke Reimer, Xavier Betts, Ramir Johnson, and Omar Manning. Other than that, I went through every single player that Frost has had on his roster, ones that either, like I said, they've either stayed and graduated or are currently on our roster. There really isn't much to pick from. These are great names, great players. They've contributed a lot to our team, but not a single one of them ended up in the top 3 draft picks or top 3 rounds in the draft pick. By no stretch of the imagination have they seen any sort of significant awards aside from, onesies and twosies. But yeah, obviously a lot of notable players aren't Frost recruits simply because he's only been here for 4 seasons. An honorable mention that I do have is Adrian Martinez. He is the only one I left off the list simply because he technically graduated, but he did do a graduation transfer to K-State, therefore not meeting my criteria. And then the last of notable players are notable players that transferred, which there's only 5 of them that I could possibly figure out. We got number 1, absolute standout player for Kentucky this year, Wandale Robinson. He had over 1,300 yards of reception, or 1,300 yards receiving for this 2021 season. Number 2, I had J.D. Spielman. He transferred to TCU, and then he ended up retiring. Honestly, I think if he would have stayed around here, he would have been a lot more successful. Number 3, as I stated before, is Adrian Martinez, transferring to K-State. And this one's a little bit controversial. Luke McCaffrey. I don't think he's a notable quarterback, but I only included him simply because I do think if he would have changed his position and used his athleticism elsewhere, he definitely would have been able to contribute to our squad. And then last on the list is Greg Bell. He ended up having a 1,000-yard rushing season this year at San Diego State. So that's just kind of some notable players, records, all that stuff. I only have one more thing I wanted to talk about, which is just the coaching staff and then just a goofy little statistic about our win-loss record that I'm sure we can talk about. But before I go just way into the weeds with all of that, in regard to notable players and our win-loss record, does anybody have anything significant that they want to add or comment on?
I didn't realize that we were going to go into the notable players portion of Scott Frost, but that is interesting. I think you covered it all. When I was looking, going over it in my head, I think you covered all of, the past players and the current players. I was waiting for you to say Marcus Fleming because I was a huge Marcus Fleming guy. I've always been a Marcus Fleming guy, so I always bring him up as a guy that transferred to Maryland, even though he never panned out there. But I thought
you got Mo Washington. He's at Grambling now, isn't he?
Yeah, there were a few other ones like Marcus Fleming, and then Tyjon Lindsey was another one that I considered,
Oregon
but
State. Yep.
simply because they didn't really have like standout stats to really look at. The only, like I said, Luke McCaffrey was the only exception that I made just because of his pure athleticism. Not to say that Tyjon Lindsey or Marcus Fleming didn't have outstanding athleticism. I think I'm just, pulling out the McCaffrey name because, well, he's a McCaffrey, but
It's athletic.
yeah, I kind of took. What was that?
Who was that linebacker that went to Oregon State too?
Avery
Roberts.
Avery Roberts.
Roberts, yeah, he's looking good out there.
Tackles this year, yeah.
As far as one on that state, I would have added Dedrick Mills in there.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Dedrick Mills.
He's the last running back to lead Nebraska in rushing yards.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah,
true.
well, did Martinez beat out Ozigbo for rushing yards in 18?
No, but I
thought
mean,
Ozigbo
Dedrick Mills came after Zigbo.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, Scott, I think you nailed everything that most of us already know. It's been a rough sled for 4 years. I remember for me, Juan and I were sitting on the couch watching his introductory press conference and literally holding back tears because, yeah, our boy's coming home, And I remember how much shit he got as a quarterback while he was here that he didn't deserve. So that's probably why I've been such an apologist for most of the 4 years. But, to be fair, I think the program's kind of been a little bit snake bit since that Akron game. When it got rained out, I thought, oh, crap, even God hates us now. So, and then you had the 0-6 start to 2018. We've lost every overtime game we've played that Frost has been here. The 2019 Colorado debacle, I'll never forget that. Couldn't find a decent kicker in 2019 after Pickering got hurt. Rumor has it, getting laid. 2020 Illinois debacle, or 2021, that was 2020, the McCaffrey game. And our kicker that year was Big Ten Kicker of the Year, and then he couldn't find the middle of the uprights to save his ass starting this year. It's just been a literal comedy of errors. To me, the mark of the Frost era, absolute mark of the Frost era, is self-destructing losses. Games basically won. Northwestern 2018, they come back from 14 freaking points or 10 points down and they beat us at the end of the game because we can't get out of our own way. That has been the mark of the Frost era. Though I will say this, at the very, very end of everything, the last thing we expected was Shenander's defense to be good. So I kind of give Frost a little bit of credit, and maybe just by pure luck, identifying a guy that's a pretty damn good defensive coordinator and is probably going to get himself a decent job somewhere in the next couple of years if his defenses don't fall apart. But anybody else got anything to say on the Frost era? I know Justin's got plenty, or Tyler, or.
Well, I think, Scott, you're going to get into some of the staff stuff, but when I think of the Frost era, I think it comes down to some critical mistakes he made early on. I think the decision to bring his whole UCF staff in retrospect was a mistake. They just weren't game enough. I think the way that he went into recruiting early on, he really wanted a tear down approach. I think his hubris about what his offense could be with the talent he had and the style of the Big Ten, these were all misfires. But Ken, to your point, since then, I've seen Scott Frost starting to make adjustments. I love what they've done for coaching staff going into 2022. but it's been comical the reason we just haven't gone over the mark. Like this year is a prime example. Like there's a reason why the one losses kept going, and that we kept talking about how we were really, really good. We just couldn't win games, and national media picked up on it. And I do take these as signs that the program is correcting, and Frost has kind of overcome some of his early mistakes, but it's been bad. It's been bad to start. I'm glad he's getting a leash long enough to fix it, because I do see the evidence that the wheels aren't turning that way.
So the evidence is having to fire half, or basically all of his offensive staff.
Well, I think that
that's a good thing.
The replacement of the staff with different coaches was redoing the mistake he made early on. I don't know if you listened when I said that was a mistake, but
well,
no,
the other
it
mistake
is,
was waiting 4 years to do it.
Yeah, to add to that, I mean, if you were to just put into like one word describing the Frost era, and it has to be a disaster, right? It's been a disaster, and the win-loss record aside, that's one thing. We all know how bad that is. We haven't finished better than 5th in the conference or in our division. Last year we finished dead last in the division. And then you look at the hires that he's had. He's headed into his 5th year. We're about to be on our 3rd offensive coordinator. The first 2 hires that he had just weren't the right guy, but he chose those guys. We're about to bring in our 4th different special teams coordinator in whatever capacity, whether it's a coach or analyst or whatever. Yeah, he's making better decisions hiring, but it's all because he's made such shitty decisions over the first 4 years.
Yeah, there's definitely
school of hard knocks
to that. It's hard to fault him for bringing his whole staff from UCF, because they caught lightning in a bottle and they did what they did in the 2 years that they were there. Part of me was kind of, maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe he needs to get the grizzled old veteran to run his offense and his defense. But turns out Shenander was pretty good. I hear you. I wouldn't characterize it as disaster. I'd probably characterize it as floundering. This is what he's done for 4 years, especially on offense.
Well, it's like unclutch. Unclutch would be the word I would use.
Well, Derek? Scott, you were talking about all the wins that
Never mind.
Scott Frost has had, right? And whoever, the records. I mean, the key thing is 4 years of playing, and, however many games that's been, 44 or whatever, 0 signature wins. How many other coaches out there? I mean, you look at Brett Bielema his first year, he's got signature wins out there. I mean, there's people are getting signature wins all the time. It shouldn't be that hard to do. You shouldn't have to wait 4 years to even have a signature win. So all this progress, okay, we're playing within 1 score of good teams. Well, who do you freaking do? I mean, I don't know. It's been a disaster. There are signs that it's we want to think that with all the new hires that it's going to get better, and it can't get any worse. I think he's bringing in some great guys, so there's a little bit of promise there. But the last 4 years, it's just a disaster.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think what we discussed on the last live stream that we did together or something, I don't remember if it was post recording or something, but I truly believe that if we didn't have the COVID 2020 season, I believe that Ryan Held, Mario Verduzco, Matt Lubick, and Greg Austin would have been canned already, and we would have had a completely different coaching staff this year. But I think Frost, and like many other coaches, not to say that there weren't coaches that were willing to fire, or honestly head coaches getting fired throughout COVID, but I think that Frost felt a certain level of loyalty to his guys. Obviously, he's had loyalty to them for 4 years up to this point. And it took all the way to this disastrous season before he was willing to let go and cut the ties between his brotherhood that he had over at UCF. And I think that it's, he's making changes that have yet to pan out as good, but I mean, reading the writing on the walls with these coaching hires, I think we're going in the right direction, but we won't know until we actually see it come to fruition, and Lord knows if that'll even happen. But I'll just go through these the 7 assistant coaches in the last 4 years that we've gone through. and 4 of them obviously being fired in the last year. We had Troy Walters from 2018 to 2019 as our offensive coordinator, wide receivers coach. I mean, I love the dude. I mean, his interviews, he was always an upstanding guy, but he just didn't pan out. And then Javon Dewitt, he was our outside linebacker and special teams coordinator from 2018 to 2019. Poor guy just was in bad health and ended up departing to go to North Carolina. So can't really blame the guy there. And then, then like we said, Ryan Held, Mario Verduzco, Matt Lubick, and Greg Austin, they're all gone. And then the only, out of these 7 coaches that we've had, only Tony Tuioti and Javon Dewitt have left on their own volition. So, and Tony Tuioti is the upstanding guy that I wish he didn't go to Oregon, but I wish him the best of luck there. And then, like you said earlier, Dad, that God, I think Frost would be gone already. He would have been gone years ago if we didn't have the defense that we did with Eric Shenander being our defensive coordinator, because he's pretty much been the cornerstone of our team, which is precisely the opposite of what Husker Nation expected after hiring Frost. Then I think
he's also been around because he's Frost.
Yep.
There is some privilege to being a former player. There really is.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know, but I'm just saying that there wasn't hardly anything to hold on to with Frost for these last 4 years, aside from the defense. There hasn't been any consistency in any room or any productivity in any room besides our defense collectively. And I mean, I guess I do got to give credit where it's due. Sean Becton, I feel like, has done a pretty decent job at the tight end room when you consider the fact that we haven't actually seen a like spotlight on the tight end room in regard to game plan. But I think Sean Becton has done a good job. He's been here. He's an OG. These are the OGs that I got. You got Eric Shenander, Sean Becton, Mike Dawson, which, I mean, he technically went away to the Giants for a season, but then he came back. And then Travis Fisher and Barrett Ruud. Those are the guys that are still here and still doing pretty dang good work for the Huskers. But that's pretty much a reflection of our coaching staff. And it's been definitely down, but there have been some ups to look at. And it's just like what we said earlier, it's going to be, a pain in the butt next season if these coaching hires don't actually pan out. Frost will be gone. They will all be fired, and Eric Shenander will probably be one of the few guys that actually goes somewhere else and ends up successful, I hope. But that's kind of my coaching staff reflection. And I've talked about this before. This is the last point I wanted to make in regard to reflecting on the Frost era. It's the 2021 season anomaly of losing 8 games by 1 score or less, and only 1 game by more than that. And that was against Ohio State, where we lost by 9. This last 2021 season, if every single 1-score game in the entire college football landscape were flipped the other way, the most notable team that the college football subreddit were unanimously talking about was our beloved Scarlet and Cream. Because the East Division would have finished with Ohio State on top being 11-11 or 11-1. And the West Division would have finished with Nebraska on top being 11-1. And oddly enough, Alabama would have finished the regular season 8-4. But the playoff contenders through that rubric, I guess, it would be Pittsburgh at 10-2, Ohio State at 11-1, Nebraska 11-1, Cal at 9-2, Utah 11-1, and Georgia 11-1. Those would be the playoff contenders if that fantasy season of 1-score losses flipped the other way would have panned out. Right. So that's just a fun little. It's fun. I don't know what fun really is, if that's my definition of fun, but it's just fun little fact to reflect on.
Well, overall, that's a depressing topic there to start out with, Scott.
You're welcome.
It is. But But we really should move on to the next one since we've got 5 more to go.